As with most things, you know, it's the guys on the court or the guy in the cockpit that gets all the credit for it. You know, they're the people that are seen. The biggest deal in all this is keeping these airplanes working. So Dan's got an unbelievable group of maintainers. Jimmy's got the same thing. And, you know, so we get in the airplane, we walk out there and we maybe go fly for an hour max. I'll guarantee you there's 10 hours of work that's happened to make that happen. Really, at the end of the day, the flying's pretty easy. Keeping these airplanes together and keeping them up in the air, that's a big, big deal.
I would say that the maintenance factor of the airplane, the safety factors of the airplane are one and the same. You cannot be safety first unless you have proper maintenance. To maintain those airplanes properly, it's expensive, and it takes full-time people working with it. You make no compromises whatsoever. I don't care if it seems like something insignificant. With what they're doing with these airplanes, it's significant.
It's difficult. It's difficult. It's not a moment doesn't go by, and anyone who's ever worked on an airplane knows. Second guess yourself all the time. You'll be sleeping at night and wake up in the middle of the night every once in a while. We've all done it, and in shock and thinking, did I put that washer back on? Did I do that? Did I actually put the cap on? Did I safety that correctly? We always second guess ourselves, and you know, I think it's a market of people that really care and try their hardest. But as far as building the relationship, it just takes time. We have to be meticulous in what we do, and we can't have an ego.
Every night when they put the planes to bed, and we get to go out and have fun and talk about the day and have a few cocktails and joke it up, guess what? There's a handful of guys that are in that hangar with rags, polishing those aircraft to make sure that they look good for the next day. So the unsung heroes, the maintenance guys that really allow them to train the way they train with safe equipment, which is by far and away the most important portion of flying, is having safe equipment. They have that available to them. And, oh, by the way, all those planes are just gorgeous.
We come into work, we do our job, and we check each other out. Everyone out there will look at each other's work, make sure we've done it right. We do that so we don't make a mistake. And on a day-to-day basis, the pilots, Jimmy, Dan, Ed, whoever may be flying our airplanes, come in and don't see anything wrong that we have overlooked, that we might have made a mistake on. And in that way, we can build a trust together somewhat, where they feel comfortable that we have done it when they've asked us where do we stand. They'll still go look over what we've done, and you have to realize that they are in that airplane and we're not. We're on the ground, and they're the only ones that are going to suffer if something happens. So when they look over what we did again, or they check the oil for the third time, even though we've already done it, there's no problem with that. We don't look at that in a bad way.
You can't be in this because you get a lot of attaboys. Because this isn't, you know, oh crap, takes away a lot of attaboys. So then you have to build up a lot more attaboys. You gotta have, you know, satisfaction in your work, and that's gotta be one of the things that really pushes you along, because other than that, you know, you're not getting glory. You get covered in glory here, but, you know, it's mostly oil, hydraulic fluid, whatever.
When you watch the Horseman show, when you watch the routine and you see what goes on, we represent like about that much of what it takes to make this thing happen. All the work, everything that goes on happens in the hangar. It happens with guys like Randy. It happens with Jimmy's mechanics and anybody that works on it to keep it up in the air. And a lot of that is just the love and care for making sure that the airplanes are great. Dan and his whole team, they are meticulous. I mean, these airplanes want for nothing, but it takes a lot of work to make it work, and it doesn't always work.
I mean, I've always wanted to be a mechanic since I was a kid. I mean, ever since taking apart, my mini bike. I've always been working on engines and trying to learn them and figure them out. It does take an element of creativity, and, you can't be rigid when you're working on these airplanes. You really have to be, you got to be the person who at 3 in the morning wakes up and has an idea.
They need to be mechanically inclined to be able to fix it and be smart and open-minded. But I'm looking for someone who wants to be there, wants to be a part of our team
For me, it's a combination between the challenge of mechanically solving problems and getting the airplane out the door, and then also a bit of preserving history.
The Horseman is simply a means to an end, as far as I see it, or the flying that we do is a means to an end, because this is an opportunity to keep history alive. It's not palpable by reading it in a book, but you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it.
Just getting the planes to an air show is a big deal. Making sure that we stop at places where we can service them or we can get them worked on if they need work. It's logistically, it's a challenge.
But one of the things that we do have to deal with on a daily basis is the lack of spare parts and the lack of suppliers of those parts for these airplanes. If we can't find it, and we've scoured the area and some are just none around, we will actually find someone that'll manufacture one. Most of the detailed drawings for the parts, the airplane, are still available where we can have them manufactured.
A lot of the brain work comes in sometimes trying to figure out how to do something, whether it's building tooling, whether it's a process in the engine. Now you're zeroing in, you're checking all these different things, and finally you have some feedback that says, wow, I operated this, but it didn't work right. So therefore that gives you that path to follow now.
Most of these guys have grown up since they were maybe even pre-teens. For Steve, forever. And a lot of these guys have been in it for 20, 30 years. Myself, I'm new to this, and I have to not be so stuck up to where I'm just going to figure it out on my own. It's too much at stake. We only have one engine. It's old. The airplanes are old. The engines are, of course, they're overhauled, but there's a lot to them.
I'm a big believer that the airplanes kind of talk to you in a sense that as long as you're constantly monitoring them, they're going to be telling you a lot of times before something fails that there is a problem that's happening.
The relationship you have with the people that take care of your plane is, I would say, almost as intimate, if not as intimate, as the relationship you have with the people you're flying with.
Making sure they're ready to go every time. I just try to go over things as many times as I can. It's nuts and bolts. Most of the people that are mechanically inclined take it apart, but can you put it back together correctly?
Going back to being able to sleep at night, you got to do the job right, whether it takes a certain tool, whether it takes a certain way of thinking, whether it takes making a phone call to somebody to get the info that you might not have, somebody else that's dealt with some particular part. You got to do that in order to get the job done. Once I say it's okay to go, as far as I'm concerned, you go do whatever you have to do. I'm not going to sit there and say, gee, take the airplane, but instead of pulling 3 Gs, you better only pull 1.5 Gs with it. No. It's either going to go out and do the job that they need to do, or it's not going.
And that's the hardest thing I have, is make sure everything is the way it needs to be, everyone's safe. That's what I strive to do, and for me, I guess that's the hardest thing.